Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed Khan. Unfortunately, when we talk about the Pakistan-US relationship these days, it's one step forward and two steps back. And continuing in the same vein, there has been a bill that has been raised in the House of Representatives and the Senate, and they are seeking to end US economic aid to Pakistan. And while the Trump administration has already suspended military aid, this bill was introduced in the House of Representatives as a non-defense aid to Pakistan, and this money should also be set aside for the purposes of investing in US infrastructure within the United States. And the reason for that is because Pakistan provides military aid and intelligence to terrorists, which is a charge that Pakistan has vehemently denied over the course of our engagement with the US. That is going to be our conversation for today. And our second topic is concerning something very important at home, and that is the Mashal Khan lynching case. The shooter, Imran Ali, has been sentenced to death. 5 people have been given 25 years in jail. We will talk about the ramifications of the judgment of the Anti-Terrorism Court in the Mashal Khan case as well. Let's get the conversation started. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me today, we have, first of all, Burhan Islam Saab. He's a former ambassador. And with him, we have Khurram Iqbal, who is a lecturer at the NDU and an expert in counterterrorism. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Sir, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, this new bill that has been raised in the House of Representatives asking the US government to completely cut off all kinds of aid to Pakistan, whether it is developmental aid, non-military aid. What does that really signify, and what should the Pakistanis what kind of a message should they really understand?
Well, Waqas' message is very clear. The United States President's message, the South Asia strategy of 21st August, was actually the turning point in that sense. That strategy that he mentioned, he clearly identified Pakistan as a country which is not helping it win the war in Afghanistan. While it is failing, United States is failing in Afghanistan, it wants to put the blame on one country and one group of people. It has sadly identified Pakistan as the country, which is very sad, I must say. So we knew from then onwards that these measures are coming. In the process, America has identified Pakistan as one of the countries to be targeted, and either through pressure, bullying, or if Pakistan gives in, a lot of other do's and do-mores will come. If Pakistan doesn't, then further pressure will come. Now, we are in great difficulty. I think we should have understood it long time ago. Either our policymakers already know about it, they understand, and they must be preparing for the response. But we all knew it 6 months ago, 4 months ago, that the American president is going to take this measure, this step, sooner or later. So it has come very soon, I must say. So Pakistan will have to be careful. The bill that has come means all your economic assistance will be discontinued. Unfortunately, we depend a lot on US assistance and help, military assistance, plus this one. So military already, they said, we are discontinuing, now economic one. It was big sort of support, and throughout last 10, 20 years. America has been a great supporter. We have been having this sort of relationship with the United States, a lot of dependency. Now it will be a lot of pressure to our economy, to our system. Unfortunately, we haven't learned to live on our own or to stand on our feet. This is not a new story. It has been.
So it could even be a blessing in disguise in a way.
We will try to stand, but one
Hopefully.
doesn't know we have enough strength in our muscles to stand.
Let's hope that we do, sir. I think that is very important. I would take it as a blessing in disguise. Khurram, when we look at the legislation, it was introduced by Congressman Mark Sanford from South Carolina and Thomas Massey from Kentucky. They want to prohibit the US State Department and US aid from sending American taxpayer money to Pakistan. Instead, they want to funnel these or redirect these funds to the Highway Trust Fund that is supposed to work for US infrastructure and road projects. And they also are calling it a common sense bill, which puts America first, as is Mr. Trump's policy. But I would like to quote what he says. He says that when the American people support other nations, our generosity shouldn't be used to reward terrorists with taxpayer dollars. So do you think that that is a fair statement coming from a US senator such as the one that we just mentioned?
It does not behove United States of America to pass such a statement, because they must realize that America at the moment enjoys the status of the sole superpower. It is not only concerned with protecting what is in America, but it basically concerns with global strategic implications and ramifications.
Unfortunately, that seems to be changing.
That seems to be changing, and in that sense, this is certainly a blessing in disguise, not only for Pakistan, for a number of countries who have been previously dependent on American aid. I would agree with the ambassador that in the past, Pakistan has been dependent on American aid, but in the recent past, there has been a significant decline in American aid for Pakistan, be it military aid or the civilian aid. And similarly, if you look at the foreign direct investment in Pakistan, America ranks perhaps 6th after China, Malaysia, France, and other countries.
But if I'm not correct, if I'm correct, sir, or if I'm not, then please correct me. 2017 saw the US as the largest trading partner with Pakistan.
Well, I'm talking about the first 3 months of the last forecast, because it varies after every quarter.
Okay.
So perhaps in one particular quarter, Americans would have surpassed China as the largest foreign direct investor in Pakistan, but during last few quarters, this has not been the situation.
Right.
So when it comes to self-sufficient or self-reliance, I think Pakistan should now work towards strengthening its economic muscle. This is only how we can achieve our strategic ambitions as well. How that is possible, I think CPAC provides a window of opportunity, because with United States of America, I don't think that convergence of interest is possible at strategic level, because strategically, America at the moment is only concerned with protecting its status as a sole superpower. Whereas in Pakistan, we look towards a world where our different powers balancing each other. So at that level, there is simply no convergence between Pakistan and United States, but on tactical level, we will continue to engage with United States of America. As it is said, this is a love-hate relationship between the two countries, and this is a relationship where divorce is not possible, and even happy ending is not foreseeable. So that's how it is likely to be.
But it's very hurtful, sir, because we did a show on the US-Pakistan relationship yesterday as well, and yesterday we had some good statements coming from General Joseph Votel when he said that there is no solution in Afghanistan without Pakistan, and they want to continue their engagement with Pakistan and so on and so forth. And there were good sounding messages coming from the American administration. But today, when we read the story about the all kinds of aid being shut down for Pakistan, it puts us in a very different light. Ambassador Saab, I would also like to quote what Senator Rand Paul has said in a companion legislation. He said that we fail to protect the country and steward taxpayers' hard-earned money when we support countries that chant death to America and burn our flag. And let us bring the money home and use it to help rebuild our infrastructure instead of giving it to a nation that persecutes Christians and imprisons people such as the doctor that helped us get Osama bin Laden, quote unquote, sir. Senator Paul said that. So a statement like that, when we get to hear it, what do you think goes through the minds of their Pakistani friends of the US?
You see, the United States, this has always been the case. The Americans do convey mixed messages. As a military commanders that you mentioned were giving one set of message, and now the Congress people are saying something else. Basically, it is very clear that Americans want to corner Pakistan and squeeze Pakistan as much as possible. And by saying that kind of statement, as you have quoted of Rand, you know, it doesn't make sense. They don't realize the sacrifices and contributions that Pakistan made last 16 years. You know, you have attacked Afghanistan 580 times, I think, 580,000 times. last several years.
And in this month only, so
Attacks.
there was the largest amount of number of bombs that were dropped
You have
in
dropped.
Afghanistan by the US.
Some analysts are saying that this is as much or half of the bombing attacks that you had during the Second World War. What you have achieved in Afghanistan, you cannot even claim that half of the territory is under your control. Still half is with the Taliban, and that much of contribution we made. All your military supplies and assistance and everything to your troops and to your bases in America had to go or transit through Pakistan. Now you are end of the day, you are saying that Pakistan has done nothing, we just cheated them. It's a dishonorable thing to say to a friend who served your country. I mean, not only for your sake, but also for our sake. We thought that you are going for a great cause in Afghanistan, fighting terrorism. We took it as our objective also, and the amount of contributions. How many soldiers of yours have died? I mean, see the ratio. Yours is more than 100,000, I think, in Afghanistan, and we have lost 70,000 people, 7,000 military personnel by sitting inside Pakistan and fighting your war or facing the backlash of the effort that we made, the support that we are providing to the United States. Having considered that, and if you look at this statement, you would think it is not, something coming from a legislature or a congressman or a senator, not recognizing the contribution of Pakistan and saying that whatever they did is fine, but whatever we did is zero. It doesn't work like that in international relations. I think American policy makers and also the Congress people should realize that it is a relationship between states where give and take takes place. There is a time when you will be seeing that possibly you are benefiting more. Another occasion will come when we will realize that your partner is benefiting more from your friendship. So it is a give and take relationship where you must respect your interlocutors' point of view and their difficulties that they are explaining in terms of, I am referring to our policy towards Afghanistan. I mean, no other country contributed more than what we did. Whatever achievement the Americans are now counting, it's all because of Pakistan. Under these circumstances, you can't say that, I mean, all your money was wasted and you want to take your money back and invest in your road transport and other whatever highway system. Do that, my friends, but issue is, in the international politics, you can't isolate yourself. America.
That is what they're moving towards, isolationism.
And second topic of yours possibly will be that, but I don't want to jump into that. But basically, in isolation, you can't work. You have to work with your partners. You have to work with your alliance, associates, and find out as to how best to move forward. If
so we'll come to that. I want to also ask Khurram this question that. When we look at the American policy now that is being implemented in the region, do you think that's going to convince Islamabad to support the US strategy for defeating the Taliban, or is it going to be counterproductive?
Not at all. This policy of the United States of America will certainly backfire. They have almost lost Islamabad, and if they continue with this policy, they would also lose other important countries in the region. Because their policy in South Asia revolves around presenting India as the regional policeman. In the past, such efforts have been made, and the opposition came not only from Pakistan, but other regional countries have also opposed this idea of presenting India as a regional policeman, because India has its own sort of problem with Sri Lanka, Nepal. At the moment with Bangladesh, they have cordial relations, but that has not been the case in the history of Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
So that policy is not likely to work for the United States of America, because America is competing with China in South Asia. On one hand, you have China, which is proposing projects worth billions of dollars. And on the other hand, you have got America, which is basically withdrawing little bit of aid that it provided to the South Asian countries, including Pakistan. So in doing so, America would lose its goodwill in the region, and it will provide an ample space to China to basically have all South Asian nations
fill in the
on its
vacuum.
side. Exactly.
Absolutely. That's very important. And one thing, you also raised this issue. It seems that right now, Washington seems to be merely a voice or a platform for Indian policy in the region. We've seen that ever since Mr. Trump has come, he has a very close coterie of Indians who are working with him in the White House. Indians seem to have a lot of influence in Washington these days. How long do you think this influence is going to last, and whether this influence is the right way for the U.S. to go, sir?
Fortunately or unfortunately, Indians in the United States are doing a good job for their country. Their diaspora is very effective, and they have consistently worked for their country. They have a common goal and objective, and their embassy and their leadership there, they do tell or they do explain as to how good this overseas community can influence the policymakers and in the United States, and they have done very well. And I can tell you that you cannot in the foreseeable future see any debacle in that process. American community and those who are in the decision making bodies in the United States, in the academic field wise, they're very effective, and they're going to harm Pakistan's interest as much as they can. Americans must understand that this is a process. Today, in the past, we had a lot of people, but now we don't have too many. This is something that we must review and to see how we can get back to our original position as to have important people and important positions in the United States. But I think Americans should not get that much of impressed and influenced by them, by the Indians. I personally think that okay, they are nationalist, but how much you can trust on one group of people, overseas community, and when you see that they are working, American decision makers must understand that they are working with a particular vision to spoil Pakistan's image and also take Pakistan's importance out of the table of the American decision makers. It must be understood that this possibly is not a long-term stuff. Every country goes through that process, ups and downs. Pakistan, for the time being, pursuing a policy in the context of Afghanistan, which is in our interest, and it is clashing with the American interest, it seems, although broader principle-wise, it is not. What Americans want, we also want the same thing, to see the defeat of the extremist or the terrorist in Afghanistan. But in that case, you must keep Pakistan on your right side. You can't say that India as a proxy in the region should play your game or your ball. I think it is a short-term view that they are having.
Well, sir,
Pakistan is a neighbor. You can't ignore Pakistan.
Absolutely, sir. And also to just throw out the historical relationship between the U.S. and Pakistan just out of the window is also
not possible,
not
advisable.
Not advisable at all. But let us now talk about Pakistan's options, sir. Don't you think it's high time that we reviewed our entire gamut of relationship with the U.S.? First of all, they are using our airspace, they're using our land routes for their supply of their troops in Afghanistan. Shouldn't that be renegotiated on international, whatever international precedents there are?
There's certainly a need for Pakistan to use its cards very wisely. We have certain cards against the United States of America when it comes to Afghanistan. As you have said, using Pakistan's airspace, using Pakistan's land routes to supply the American forces in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, we have not used them wisely. Same is the case with the US drone strikes inside Pakistan. Our opposition or our protests have been only limited to the diplomatic protests. We have not taken effective steps to basically discourage the United States of America in doing so. I think this is mainly because of the reason that in our policy-making circles, pro-American sentiments still run very high. And this is because of a historical legacy. Those policymakers have cooperated and partnered with the United States of America during the Cold War, then during the War on Terror, and they are not likely to give up on their pro-American sentiment no matter what American policies are there for Pakistan. I think this is high time that we should actually revise and revisit our relations with the United States of America, because we cannot actually support their global strategic narrative, that is to protect the American global hegemony. So what we should do, besides using our cards in Afghanistan, our diplomats should work towards an increasingly multipolar or bipolar world where you have different powers balancing each other, and that's what would suit countries like Pakistan the maximum.
And if we now move on to the isolationism aspects that America is moving towards, first of all, the new vision that is being presented by the Trump administration, it seems to be a very xenophobic, reductionist, takes a very reductionist view of international law. So do you think that that is also going to affect the United States relationship, not just with Pakistan, but with the entire world?
It is obviously going to affect adversely because America is an unchallenged power of a sort. It is a superpower, as we call it. It is a singular superpower now in a unipolar setup. My colleague wants a multipolar, but it will take some time. In that position, first time, when you are unchallenged authority of the world, it is unusual that such a power would be seeking isolation. I mean, you are ruling the world in a way that you are directing all the affairs of the international relating to power projection and other stuff. And there you are seeking that, no, I think we should restrict our role in global affairs. It never happened in the past. We have seen in the 19th century the isolationism. They realized very soon the wars in Europe and elsewhere, how America was totally not considered, but ultimately it had to come back. It was not a big influential power for about 60, 70 years. But then it had to come back. Then it came back well after the First World War. It did well. Second World War played an important role ultimately, and later after the World War II, second. Now, question is, you have a voice in everything, and every country, the international system has developed in such a way, post-Cold War system, where US is an important player. Your say is important, come to talk about climate change, your global
we'll be
trade,
talking about those as well,
trade, and all these issues.
If we just start enumerating the policy decisions that the US has taken, Khurram, this question is for you. First of all, they recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That was against international law and against UNSC resolutions previously. So they have just shown no concern or flagrantly walked ripshod over the entire international law and the perception and the perceptions of the people regarding the issue of Palestine. So in your opinion, how is that going to play out for the US? And then not only that, afterwards they also penalized countries or threatened to penalize countries, cut off their aid if they voted against the United States decision. So these moves within international politics, how are they going to be taken by the rest of the world?
Waqas, these moves suggest that United States of America is gradually losing the will and capacity to lead the world. As long as United States of America had the will to lead the world, their rhetoric, their policies were entirely different. I don't think that United States of America enjoys the same status as it enjoyed in the 90s or the first few years of the 21st century. United States of America is not the sole and unchallenged superpower any longer. Middle East is an important case in point, where they tried to act unilaterally, but they could not because of the presence of the Russians. And they had to basically listen to what the regional players are saying. So if United States of America continues with its unilateral stance, with its protectionist policies, I think it will lose the regions one by one as they have lost the Middle East to the Russians. Today, Russians enjoy more goodwill in the Middle East than United States of America without spending a single penny. And they have done so by skillfully using their military advantage in the region. So United States of America, I would again say, is losing the will and capacity to act as the sole superpower. Now there's a different world that we are living in, and I think that is what will benefit the third world and the developing country, because this status of United States of America as the sole superpower has benefited very few at the cost of so many. After the Cold War, we have seen United States of America acting as the sole superpower, only benefiting the Western Europe or some countries in Asia.
Israel.
what Africa has got, what major part of Asia has got. Now I think when the Asian movement is about to arrive, United States of America is making all efforts to reverse the rise of Asia. And if Asian nations like India and Japan do not act rationally, we will lose this historic moment to change the course of history.
Yeah, it seems that that's where it's heading. But let's also talk about the Iran deal. Now, the Trump administration is also trying to, or has tried in the past, to renege on the Iran deal. But luckily, the European countries have pushed America back, and they have not been. America has not been able to get out of that particular deal. Then we also have the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, the TTP, that the TPP, and the Paris Climate Change Accord as well. So all these very important global issues that countries hold very dearly, America is trying to walk back from these very important deals. So how do you think the Europeans are actually looking at these American moves and the Trump administration's decisions?
Europeans are at the moment unwilling to stay submissive to the American dictates, and they have demonstrated that on a number of occasions. As you have seen Angela Merkel in Germany and a number of other leaders, they may try to form a distinct pole in an increasingly transforming world, because United States of America is not the same United States of America as it was a few years ago. So what Europe is doing now, Europe is shaping its own course, having more partners. For example, in case of Afghanistan, Europe always toed the line of America, where at the moment that is not the case. European rhetoric or policy stance is not as strict on Afghanistan against Pakistan as you see in case of America. So Europe is finding its own course, and Europe, I think, has consciously refused to stay subordinate to United States of America, and that will be a very interesting development to see.
And Ambassador Saab, if you also look at the recent steps taken by the US, they seem to signal an end to its persona as an advocate of international law. Previously, we saw the rhetoric of the US that international law is to be respected, but now what we're seeing under the Trump administration is the complete opposite of that. How is that going to play out for the US?
I think it will go to great disadvantage of the United States. International law and the general code of interstate relationship, which is regulated through this legal system of international law, cannot be ignored if you have to have a stable international system. So United States as a big power, I should say, should not ignore the fact that if you ignore it, if every country has to do that, the system will not work. If you have made a commitment in international law or a commitment you have made in the context of, for example, Iran, it is something the other countries or Europeans are looking forward to. They all thought it is a plan to keep Iran away from this nuclear path. It was coming to a path of which is constructive engagement. And one country which is important, of course, the United States, saying that we are not part of it. So it is, though directly not part of international law, but it is part of your commitment to nations, to international community, that this is how a process was supposed to go. You are saying we are not interested anymore. So it is going to affect adversely the process. For the time being, United States being an important player will always remain unsatisfied, will always hold out a threat towards Iran, which means instability, which means global chaos.
Well, sir, that seems to be the case, and in the process, they're delegitimizing international law, and they're also previously there were staunch advocates for international law, but now they seem to be working at cross purposes with international law. Khurram, how is that going to affect the entire world? Because when, as Ambassador Saab was saying, when you start delegitimizing international law, then which direction are we all going to go in?
Then parallel systems would rise under the leadership of new and emerging players in the world. China, for instance, has recently established its own version of Belt and Road Initiative courts.
And China is also now very much involved, or rather in support of international law.
Of international law, as far as it is fair. But I don't think that under the American hegemony it has served the international peace and stability. And as America continues to delegitimize international law, I would say that new players would emerge, as in form of China. When Trump becomes protectionist, President Xi Jinping presents himself as the champion of globalization. So system may remain intact or parallel system may emerge, and then you will see a parallel rise of the alternative leaders who would stand to basically safeguard the global system that emerged after the Cold War.
Well, let's also talk about the American threat of withdrawing aid from poorer, struggling states. Does that risk putting extra pressure on them, distorting their decision-making process, and even influencing their sovereignty? Isn't that illegal under international law?
Well, this has been, for example, the drone strikes. There's been a great debate how international law would treat them, but America has continued unilaterally with its drone strikes in different parts of the world, including Yemen, Pakistan, and other countries where they do not maintain their physical presence. So international law has been used and misused by the United States of America as an instrument of its global imperialist policies. And if United States continues with this misuse, America would also will lose the moral authority that it enjoyed once after the Cold War. So that's a real threat, and I don't think that American leadership is cognizant of such threats to American global position. Because Ibn Khaldun writes in his famous book Muqaddimah, when a power is declining, you have leaders such as Trump who have been imposed on that leader, who ensures that this process continues and the empires lose their way.
Well, that's rather unfortunate, but if we look at America's maneuvering in the international arena, supporting Israel, carrying out unilateral aggression, occupying and appropriating the land of another people in violation of international law, how is that being viewed by the rest of the world?
Well, you have seen what has happened in United Nations when there was a vote.
Absolutely, and the US threatened those poorer countries from cutting off their aid. Is that the way countries behave, sir?
It should not, but it does. Great powers with more leverage with you. You try to, mold the process. You try to influence. You try to put pressure on countries. It is, as many would say, that it is a sort of imperialistic attitude of a country.
But would it be a threat to international peace, sir?
In many countries, in Africa, as I understand, I served in New York, I know that African countries depend a lot on aid and assistance, more than what we have been receiving. If you do tell them that this is what you people will suffer if you don't listen to what we are saying, you are going to spoil the system. I mean, every country has a respect and dignity. Maybe many will say we'll say no to your aid and assistance, but then you will suffer a little bit because you depend on a lot of assistance. But it might have a positive side also. Every country will try to stand on their own feet, work hard, make your own position, reduce dependence, and stop listening to people who say, do more. So, no more, do more.
That would be a good thing, sir.
That would be a good thing, should be the slogan adopted by all the third world countries.
Absolutely.
We must say no more to aid and assistance, also no more to do more.
Well, sir, we are still on the topic of international law and this general notion that the international law is law and it must be respected. But the isolationist policies and the rhetoric now emanating from Washington, it again runs roughshod over the established international law. Is that going to also create a vacuum that needs to be filled? And will China be able to fill that vacuum?
This has certainly created a vacuum internationally, as you have seen the US position on Jerusalem, disregarding all
backtracking on the Iran deal, the Paris Climate Accord.
Paris Climate Accord. So when United States recedes from its global position, it itself is creating space for new players to come. And as I've seen, there is an emergence of new players. They are there to fill in that vacuum. Whether they will be able to do so by keeping the system intact, that should be the point of debate, because there is now a debate in the policymaking circles whether this transition will be peaceful or not. So I think if America continues with this rhetoric, and if Donald Trump has another term in office, so I don't think this transition will be peaceful, because to contain China, now the US is increasingly resorting to the use of force. For example, the formation of the Quad recently, consisting of Australia, Japan, India, and United States of America. That is purely a military maneuver to contain the rise of China. If Americans continue with such policies, China would be forced to react, and I think this transition in global system will not be peaceful any longer.
Well, let's hope for the best, and let's hope that saner minds prevail and the entire global order is not just turned upside down. We're going to take a short break over here, sir, and when we return, we'll continue with our second topic. So just take a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back after the break. Our second topic for discussion was the Mashal Khan lynching case. Very unfortunate incident, and sadly to say that there are many such incidents occurring in our country, and that needs to be fixed ASAP, and the powers that be really need to take cognizance of this issue. But finally, something good has happened. The Anti-Terrorism Court has handed out the sentence for the criminals who lynched Mashal Khan. And just to break it down for you, the prime accused, Imran Ali, has been given a death sentence. 5 accused have been given 25 years in jail. 25 accused have been given 4 years in jail. 26 have been acquitted. And altogether, the 61 people were charged, of which 57 were arrested. That is the situation as of now. So let's talk about the reasons that brought us to this unfortunate pass. Ambassador Saab, I'd like to start with you on this issue. What would you like to say about the very occurrence of such an incident, the use of the accusation of blasphemy, and not allowing Pakistan's laws that have been made for this purpose to actually do their job?
Actually, misusing that blasphemy law and misinterpreting it and trying to take advantage of that and cause harm to common people or somebody who could challenge some of your statements or position. You just take law to your hands and mistreat them. I think it's a great decision that the court has taken. It is in such a short time, it could take such a, I should say, very forward-looking decision. I mean, you cannot accept intolerance in the society. You just lynch people just for nothing. And maybe you had some other score to settle and you just put that blame on the person and just kill him. It's not possible. Otherwise, every day we hear all bad things in our media and elsewhere. Pakistan is these days known as a country where only crime and criminals talk about, media and everywhere. You open your TV channel, first 10 minutes is all about these terrible incidents. I think it's a good message that has been conveyed by our legal system. People should have trust in the law and legal system, and such intolerance and should not be acceptable, and they all should be punished, and exemplary punishment should be given for this sort of criminals and crimes to be stopped and barred.
Khurram Saab, what's your opinion on this issue, especially when we look at the rise of extremism within our society? Don't you think that has also played a part in creating a negative image of Pakistan all across the world abroad? And if that is correct, then what really needs to be done to fix that situation? Because that is going to be detrimental for Pakistan going forward in any way, sir.
That's certainly true that religious extremism poses a genuine threat to Pakistan. And we have no one to blame but ourselves. what we need to do to curtail rising religious extremism, I think religious clergy has a very important role to play with the state of Pakistan. When the founders of Pakistan created this country, they included and incorporated forward-looking, moderate intellectuals to interpret Islam for the masses. But as the founders subsided, what we did, we basically handed over to Islam who were not capable enough to basically interpret it for the people or the masses. So we have to reclaim Islam, hand it over to those who possess intellectual sophistication and qualification to interpret it for the masses. So that is the first thing that needs to be done. And I think with the state of Pakistan, the religious clergy, the intellectual, the media has to play a very important role here, because such rising intolerance then manifests in either in case of Mashal Khan, either in form of a terrorist attack or dharna in Faizabad. So if we have to continue with our policy against rising extremism, we should keep up the momentum, also investigate what has happened in cases like Faizabad, who were the forces who brought them here and held the entire city, basically they hijacked the entire city for so many days. So this momentum must be continued for the sake of Pakistan, because besides these external threats, if there is one internal problem that poses a threat to Pakistan's internal security and international image, that is the rising religious extremism in the society.
Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your views with PTV World. We'll leave it at that. But you heard the conversation, and in conclusion, we say that you must draw your own conclusions from what you've heard, but we hope that they are the right ones. With that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.